I just want to pitch, essentially, what movie defines the 80s? So there's a movie made in the 80s, and what do you think is a movie that essentially encapsulates, like, when you think of 80s, like, this film is basically the 80s, I guess, in all its forms. So what I actually picked is, E.T., the Extraterrestrial. Once again, heavy Stranger Things vibes from, like, obviously from E.T., like, supernatural type of element. Kids, doing things that, the adults don't believe in, and essentially kids are there to save the day. Suburban neighborhoods, but as well as, like, E.T. has, I guess, it had kind of the music and the aesthetic to it, but it was just, I feel like that, and, like, the whole Spielberg effect, I think that was the 80s. Like, when you think of generations of movies, and you think of, like, directors, for example, you think of, like, probably Spielberg was, like, at the prime in his 80s, and, like, Tarantino was the prime in the 90s. Like, every director has kind of like, oh yeah, this director's probably defined by this generation. I think E.T. and Spielberg basically defines the 80s for me. I was even gonna select something kind of like, cause that's the thing, Spielberg backed a lot of stuff back in those days, or produced, like, he did Gremlins, he, like, was a producer in that. He also produced, Back to the Future and a lot of that stuff. So, like,
oh well, you just mentioned it.
Well, there we go. Well, that's the thing. He basically put his hand in every single 80s pie. So I'm assuming Back to the Future is basically your 80s go-to movie, I guess.
I was gonna say Back to the Future Part 2. Now I know Part 2, I think it came out in '89, so it's kind of towards the end of the 80s. But I kind of like picking Back to the Future 2, just because it is supposed to be like a glimpse into what the 80s thought the future would be like, right? Like, which is still 80s, right? Like, they thought, like, it's kind of always the case, like, when we always try and think, like, oh, what's the future going to be like? It's going to be flying
cars. It's just
cars,
the most really fucked up thing.
Well, yeah, but in the sense that, like, in the end, like, what they consider 80s, like, even in, like, old sci-fi books and stuff, is still what would be, like, it's like an 80s future. And I think, Back to the Future does, like, the 80s well, in, like, the modern time. It does, like, a 80s version of the future well. It also does, like, an 80s version of the past well. Since they do go back to, I think, like, 50s or something like that, back when his mom and dad met, right? So I was also thinking Terminator 2, but Terminator 2, I think at the same time, you can kind of watch Terminator 2 and just say, hey, this happened in 2017, just forget all the, like, hacker stuff, and it still works. And I think that's the reason why, like, Terminator 2 is still, like, a bit of a timeless movie. Like, it's coming out. I don't know if it actually came out, but weren't they doing, like, a HD re-release?
I think it came and went.
It
was
came
like
and went.
Terminator 2 3D or something like that. But yeah, like,
yeah.
But yeah, once again, that movie's, it's been remastered quite a few times, but, like, it's still a solid film, and pretty much near perfect in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's just because, like, you can watch that film and it doesn't necessarily have a time where it's like it's technically set. Like, if you were to tell me, oh, okay, this was done in the 90s, I would have probably believed you, right?
Yeah.
Just because, like, like, obviously 80s, 90s are pretty, like, crossover.
Pretty late, pretty high, yeah.
Yeah, but, like, just because that's how the aesthetic is of the film, you can probably get away with, like, saying that maybe, like, late 90s or maybe mid 90s is when it came out. But in reality, it came out in the 80s. But yeah, like, in that sense, it is very timely. And the fact that it's still better than most of the new Terminators that come out. But I'm sticking with Back to the Future. I really like the. Also, as you can see, both are time travel related films, because I like time travel as a mechanic or a story MacGuffin. But Back to the Future would probably be my 80s movie.
Yep. Well,